If you're watching this video, you are hopefully looking for an easier way to understand where you are in your progress towards your graduation requirements. So I'm going to show you two ways to do that. First is by going to your timesheets and clicking on Enter Time. Now you'll see on the timesheets there are a lot of different ways you can view them: month, week, day, agenda, or track. For this purpose, I would click the Track button, so that way you can see everything nicely laid out. That'll bring you to this page, something that looks like this, where on the right, you'll see a total hours column, letting you know how many hours you've gained in each respective category here. For example, down at the bottom, I can see that I've gained 4 direct observations throughout my time at Pepperdine. I have 199 hours of supervision, approximately 350 non-clinical hours, and approximately 380 direct hours. And then they have those breakdowns in each of the subcategories here. All of this is great and super helpful, but it doesn't tell me how I'm meeting Pepperdine's specific requirements. So to see that, you're going to go to the top right-hand corner where there's a little arrow here and click on that widget sidebar. And then go down to this little graph button at the bottom that should look like a bar graph with a little arrow pointing up. Now, the first thing you want to check is that you are in the correct track. So let's say that I click on the evening track. Uh-oh, you're going to see that I have no hours here. And that's actually okay because I wasn't in the evening program. So that means that this is working correctly. And I need to make sure I select the appropriate program, which for me was the daytime sheet. So now I can see that since I've already graduated, everything should be and is green. And now we're going to go through what each of these means just so you can understand that a little better. So this first section is the MACOP hours required for degree conferral. This basically means that in order to graduate from this program, you need a minimum of 225 hours. 150 of these must be direct, and up to 75 CCA hours may be used as well. So that's pretty much all this is telling you. And then the second box, direct client contact hours for MFT license eligibility. So just like I mentioned up here, you need 150 DCC hours to be eligible to become an MFT. So this is going to tell you just what those DCC hours are. Next, we have client-centered advocacy. I know it says maximum here, but just know that for your time in this program, there is no minimum or maximum CCA that you are required to obtain. You, of course, are more than welcome to do CCA activities and use these hours to boost your total count, but you're not required to do so. You can only use up to 75 of these hours towards your degree if you choose to, towards your MFT eligibility, but you can still gain above 75. They just won't count towards that total. They will count towards licensure, however. Then you have your direct counseling hours towards LPCC eligibility. This is really important if you're pursuing both licenses. Unlike the MFT, you need a minimum of 280 direct counseling hours, not including any CCA hours, in order to be eligible to become an LPCC one day. So here's where you can kind of gauge the progress there. Then we have your direct observation requirement. Typically, this is going to be required once per term. Daytime and evening program requirements may vary slightly, but at the time I was in the program, 4 direct observations were required. So you can see that I've done exactly 4 here, which is why this has turned green. Next, you have your 35 weeks of supervision required for practicum credit. Now, one thing I want to point out is that this bar might not be entirely accurate depending on when you've been logging your hours. For example, let's say you logged hours over summer when you were not enrolled in practicum, or you logged hours maybe over winter break or spring break. These weeks of supervision will count towards licensure, but they will not count towards your practicum credit unless you have an IP. So that means that, let's say this number is 61, so it's pretty high, but I did not obtain all of these weeks of supervision while I was enrolled in practicum. So you'll just have to calculate 10 per long term, 5 per short term to make sure that you're meeting the proper supervision requirements. And feel free to consult with your CTC or professor if you have questions about that. One of the most important ones to pay attention to is this direct counseling ratio. This is super important to ensure that your hours count. So this ratio must be 5.0 or below in order for your hours to count. If you notice that you go above 5 at any point, it will turn red, and that's going to be your sign that you need to gain some more supervision in order to lower that ratio again. And as a reminder, The DCC ratio is 5 direct client contact hours to every 1 unit of supervision. And again, 1 unit of supervision can be 1 hour of individual or triadic supervision or 2 hours of group supervision. You can then see the total supervision units under that, which is 100. And you can also use this number to help manually calculate what your direct counseling ratio is if you don't want to look at the math they've done for you right up there. And then these last 2 sections, they are important, but you may not need them during your time in this program. This is basically showing you the maximum hours you can obtain while you're in the program. Most students do not hit these maximums, so you probably won't have anything to worry about. But if you notice yourself coming up pretty close to those maximums there, it might be worth consulting with your CTC and asking what your next step should be. So this first one here is basically saying your total non-clinical and clinical hours cannot exceed 1,300 during your time as a trainee. And then the second one is saying of those 1,300, no more than 750 of those can be direct counseling and supervision. And then if you'd like to see how you're doing in terms of licensure overall, you can go back up to this track view and click on the postgraduate track if you have one available. So as you can see here, there's a lot more red that's popping up. And this just means that I am not ready to be licensed yet because I'm just beginning my associateship. So this is going to help me gauge how close I am to actually obtaining licensure. So this is another way to visualize as well. I hope this was helpful and feel free to reach out to the team if you have any questions.